The stench of the blood-spit arena hit like a wet slap to the face. A humid cocktail of sweat, old weapon grease, and pickled alien glands thickened the air, swaying like invisible curtains above the battlefield. The arena pulsed with the feverish energy of 300,000 spectators, every species unified in their hunger to witness a spectacle of controlled carnage. Controlled, of course, being a generous word. Regulations in the Galactic League of Combat, GLOC, were more like suggestions written in acid and lightly sneezed upon. At the center of the chaos sat Glornak 7, a structurally questionable moon orbiting a retired star, recently converted from a prison planet to the galaxy's premier entertainment venue after a successful marketing campaign titled, "Come for the Murder, Stay for the Fried Marrow Sticks." An arena the size of a city had been hollowed from its crust, encased in transparent alloy, and filled with cheering, leering, occasionally leaking spectators. Today was no ordinary bout. Today was the final match of the Bloodspit Championships, and tension slithered through the crowd like a parasite looking for an open wound. A booming voice erupted from overhead, translated into every known dialect and at least 3 theoretical ones. Citizens of the civilized and recently somewhat pacified universe, welcome to the ultimate crucible of dominance. Today, one shall rise, one shall fall, and one shall mop up the goo. An enormous holoscreen shimmered into view, displaying today's competitors. On one side, General Korthak Dveril of the Lyrox Dominion. Height, 9 feet 6 inches. Weight, classified in tons. Reputation, undefeated warlord, breaker of planetary sieges, recreational volcano wrestler. Species, Lyrox, an apex predator species with reinforced bone armor, hydraulic limbs, and the social tact of a berserk rhinoceros. The holoscreen cut to a recording of Korthak pulverizing a 10-limbed champion from the Volari Confederacy using what looked like a chunk of a satellite. Blood and sparks everywhere. The crowd howled in approval. He raised both fists, which were really more like battering rams coated in war paint and barbed tendons. On the other side, a silence. A brief flicker of static. Then a simple name. Mira Elise Carter. Species, human. Combat record, classified. Designation, Sharpshot Unit S-3, Earth Terran Collective. The audience went momentarily quiet, confused. A few species rechecked their neural feeds. Someone in the upper section of the slime gallery laughed so hard they ruptured a minor spleen. A lone spotlight illuminated the tunnel leading to the battlefield. Out walked a woman of unremarkable stature. No gleaming armor. No ceremonial blades. No ornate grav harness or species skulls hanging from her belt. Just matte black fatigue armor. Worn. Scuffed. Lived in. The kind of outfit that didn't beg for attention. It assumed it. Mira walked with the easy gait of someone who had already done the math. A slow, measured pace that betrayed no excitement, no fear, and certainly no delusions of grandeur. She paused just short of the battle ring and blinked up into the raw fury of the arena lights. "Are we doing this?" she muttered under her breath. "Or are we just going to keep shouting adjectives?" Her voice was picked up by a microphone embedded near her throat. Every spectator heard it. Every language translated. Even the mimetic Glorks paused, mid-osmosis, to look. Somewhere, a betting algorithm screamed. In the Lyrox war camp, Korthak snarled and flexed his arms, causing the medical staff around him to duck instinctively. "This is the weapon they send to face me," he rumbled, voice like 2 asteroids grinding against a black hole. "I will not kill her. I will embarrass her. Her ancestors will feel it." He stomped toward the arena. The ground responded with visible shudders. A moment later, both combatants stood on opposite ends of the field, a hexagonal sprawl of shifting terrain designed by a committee of homicidal engineers. Floating rocks, bubbling acid pits, unpredictable gravity zones, and one suspiciously out-of-place swing set. There had been budget cuts. Korthak towered above her, eyes glowing with the kind of glee that preceded great violence. His ceremonial skull belt clattered ominously as he raised a clawed hand and pointed at her. "You have one chance to leave, human. It will not be offered twice." Mira tilted her head, one brow twitching upward. "I'd say the same to you," she replied. "But I've read your file. You're not that smart. A ripple of shock swept through the crowd. 100 alien glands hissed simultaneously. Korthak bared his teeth. You mock a Lyrox warlord? I mock everyone. You just happen to be standing in front of me. The arena's central spire hummed, spinning slowly, powering up its multi-species combat calibration array. A countdown appeared above them. 60. 59. 58. Commentators kicked into high gear. Ladies, gentlemen, and polygendered organisms, roared one, a trilateral being with sensory stalks and a voice like wet gravel. We are witnessing an historic joke. A human, has been entered into the blood-spit final. His co-commentator, a disembodied cloud of vibrating molecules, buzzed in. It's either brave or insane. Possibly both. The Lyrox Dominion has never lost in over 6 decades. And Earth. Well, let's not mention their last match. It involved dental floss, a screaming goat, and a catastrophic misunderstanding of the rules. Never forget the screaming goat, the stalked one added solemnly. The countdown ticked down. 30. 29. 28. In the VIP box, a delegation of Galactic Council members watched nervously. One particularly gelatinous official from the Yellup conglomerate whispered, "Why are we allowing this again?" A droid assistant responded, "Earth insisted on using one of their own. They called it a strategic optics play." Optics? The Yellup groaned. She'll be paced in 30 seconds. Back on the field, Mira rolled her shoulders once. Her eyes flicked from Korthak to the terrain. Acid pits left, magnetic field generator to the right, shadow bloom zone behind her. She breathed out slowly, heartbeat a metronome. 15, 14, 13. Korthak's muscles flexed in anticipation, thick cords twitching beneath skin like cracked obsidian. When I am finished, he snarled, you will not be buried. You will be absorbed. Mira cracked her neck. Romantic, she said. Do you always talk this much before getting humiliated? The crowd gasped again. Someone began hyperventilating in an upper-tier gel tank. 5, 4, 3. The holoscreen zoomed in on each fighter's face. Korthak grinning murder. Mira unreadable. 2, 1. A deafening silence. Then. A burst of light, sound, and anti-graviton pulses. The match began. Korthak charged immediately, the ground splintering beneath him. A battle roar erupted from his throat, part triumph, part bloodlust, all performance. Mira did not move. Not until the last possible second. She pivoted, not back, but sideways, barely brushing Korthak's lunge. His claws missed her neck by a breath. She dropped low, one hand touching the ground as she slid beneath a low-gravity barrier, flipping back to her feet in a single motion. The crowd roared. Not with admiration. Not yet. With confusion. The human hadn't died. She hadn't even tried to fight. She'd dodged. Korthak spun, eyes narrowing. You're fast. No, Mira said calmly. You're just predictable. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't taunting. It was a statement. And she was already calculating the next 5 moves. Above them, a new display flickered to life, streaming data from Myra's neural combat system. But the readouts were nonsense to most of the crowd. Just coordinates, trajectories, and a blinking pulse labeled Zeta Prime. The only ones who understood it were the few Earth operatives watching from deep cover. And they were leaning forward. Korthak lunged again. Mira vanished into shadow bloom, reappearing behind him with impossible speed. No visible weapons. No flash. Just the ghost of motion. He spun. She wasn't there. Then she was. Right in front of him. Looking up. Come. Korthak snarled, swung, and missed again. His claw carved the air. Her eyes never left his. She wasn't fighting. She was studying. Testing variables. He knew it. And for the first time in his very long, very victorious career, General Korthak Dveril felt the subtlest, coldest whisper of doubt. She was letting him swing, letting him think, letting him believe. The audience couldn't process it. Not yet. They were watching the storm, unaware of the sniper on the ridge. Above, the commentators hesitated. Then one whispered, "I don't think she came here to win by brawling." The other replied, almost reverently, "I think she came here to end him." And far below, Mira exhaled once more, steady and unbothered, her eyes tracking every movement, every gravitational hiccup, every flawed assumption in Korthak's monstrous form. She moved again, just one step back. Measured. Mathematical. Her lips didn't move. But in the dead hush of a stunned galactic audience, the implied words might as well have thundered. "I've got the shot." And she hadn't even drawn a weapon. Not yet. Mira Elise Carter had once been described, somewhat fondly, as the kind of woman who'd bring a butter knife to a gunfight just to prove a point. That point usually involved someone much larger bleeding out while blinking in confused disbelief. But here, on the edge of the blood-spit arena's ever-shifting battlefield, she wasn't wielding even that. No gleaming plasma weapon, no neural-linked drone swarm, not even a good old-fashioned Terran slug-thrower. Just her, a heartbeat steady calm, and the quiet whir of internal machinery that hadn't been disclosed to the Galactic League, mostly because she hadn't told them, and no one had thought to ask. She wasn't famous. She wasn't celebrated. And she certainly wasn't expected to survive. Korthak Dveril, on the other claw, had a fan club spanning 6 systems, an entire religion loosely based on his dental structure, and a mugshot that had once been voted most inspiring war crime aesthetic by Brutality Monthly. He had been forged in battle, hatched during a meteor storm on a war-torn mining colony, and raised on the philosophy of unrelenting violence and protein synthesis. His mother had reportedly chewed through a tank to save him from conscription. His father had challenged a black hole to an arm wrestling match. Korthak himself had once beaten a planetary insurgency using only a pipe wrench and enthusiastic screaming. He was also, currently, deeply offended. "She dodged," he muttered to himself, flexing a claw that had sliced through nothing but air. "Twice." From the Lyrox observation deck above, several war chaplains grunted disapproval. "She dishonors the arena," one growled. "She flees instead of fighting," another hissed. "She moves like she's thinking." Disgusting. Down below, Mira was doing exactly that. Calculations flickered in the edges of her vision. Arcs, probabilities, thermal currents, neural latency pulses from her opponent. It wasn't cheating. It was standard Terran military-grade augmentation. Just very, very well concealed. It wasn't her first fight. It just might be her last public one. Her internal monologue was quiet, almost bored. Left claw, 2.4-second wind-up. Exposed tendon at joint crease. Minor hesitation in left leg. Possible old injury? Leans into overconfidence. Unused to prolonged engagement. She sidestepped another charge, letting the gravity flux field suck Korthak slightly off course. He growled in frustration, swiping again. His claw slammed into a rock formation, pulverizing it into dust. Mira took a lazy step back. "Are you enjoying yourself?" she asked, casually wiping grit from her sleeve. Korthak spat something in his native tongue. It probably wasn't a compliment. The crowd was beginning to murmur. Not cheer. Not yet. Murmur. Like a tide shifting. In the Galactic Council skybox, diplomats twitched nervously in their seats. A representative from the Telari Swarm Collective clicked its mandibles. "The human is unsettling." "She's not fighting," another alien diplomat said. "She's delaying. Or analyzing. Perhaps she's broken." "Humans are always broken," hissed a bureaucrat from the Omari techno-priesthood. "The question is whether they function better that way." Back in the arena, Korthak took a steadying breath and raised his hands in a classic Lyrox killing stance. Claws extended, legs bent, head low, ready to pounce. "I will peel you," he snarled, "like a fruit of vengeance." Mira blinked. "That's vivid. Bit much for a first date." She sidestepped again. This time, he didn't charge. He circled her. Slowly. observing. She was irritating him, and she knew it. But she also knew that Korthak wasn't just muscle. He'd survived countless battles not because of brute strength alone, but because he learned, adapted, evolved. She could see it now behind the glowing eyes. He was watching her just as she watched him. Perfect. A twitch of excitement. Not fear. Anticipation. She hadn't had a challenge in years. She relaxed her stance just a touch, just enough to suggest vulnerability. Just enough for him to make his move. And he did. Korthak lunged, but not blindly. He feinted left, twisted midair, and slammed a claw down at an angle she hadn't seen before. She ducked. Almost. The edge of his claw grazed her shoulder, just enough to send a burst of pain up her arm. Her balance shifted, and she rolled sideways, kicking off the edge of the terrain and flipping into a low crouch. First blood. The crowd roared, thinking the human was finally cornered. Korthak laughed. You can be hit. Mira grimaced and pressed 2 fingers to the bleeding line on her shoulder. Congratulations. You've graduated to mildly competent. What now? Parade. But internally, she was recalibrating. His new move altered the probability matrix. He'd stopped underestimating her. That made him dangerous. That made him interesting. The battlefield began to shift, as it always did mid-match. Plates rotated. A gravity field collapsed in Quadrant 4. A new hazard, needle mist, sprayed into the lower zone. Neither fighter flinched. They'd trained for chaos. I read your dossier, Mira said conversationally as they circled again. You once disemboweled a Zarntor raiding party using only a field ration and an anchor chain. Korthak sneered. They underestimated me. She smiled. Yeah. That's kind of your whole thing. He charged again. This time, she met him head-on. To the untrained eye, it looked suicidal. A 9-foot armored alien juggernaut against a human woman half his mass. But she wasn't looking for a win by brawn. She wanted data. Their limbs collided in a flurry, his claws against her arms, her knees against his legs, twisting, pivoting, redirecting force. He caught her side, threw her into a rock outcrop. She landed hard, dust exploding around her. The crowd howled approval. This, they understood. Blood. Bruises. Visible pain. Mira coughed once, spat out grit, and stood slowly. Her ribs protested. Her shoulder screamed. Okay, she muttered to herself. We're warming up. Korthak strode forward, triumphant. You feel that? He bellowed. That is defeat approaching. It tastes like rust and regret. She cracked her neck. Tastes more like dental work. But hey, maybe that's just you. And then she smiled. Just a flicker. Something cool and sharp and entirely out of place in the blood-drenched sands of the arena. Because he had hurt her. Yes. But in hurting her, he had exposed his rhythm. And now she had it. Above them, the holoscreens replayed the exchange in slow motion. Her dodges, his strikes, the impact, the throw. Some analysts began to murmur about reaction time and predictive movement. Others, quietly, began adjusting odds. Down in the arena, Korthak was breathing heavier. Not tired. Not yet. But the fight had gone longer than expected. The human still stood. More importantly, she still calculated. You humans, he growled. So small, so fragile. Why do you even enter the arena? For glory. She shrugged. Some do. You. Her smile faded, just a little. Her voice dropped an octave. I'm here to see what happens when an immovable object meets a sniper who doesn't miss. He blinked. What? Never mind, she said, brushing a lock of hair from her eyes. You'll understand eventually. The announcers were in a frenzy now. One was shouting about historic upsets and calculated absurdity. Another had short-circuited from sheer confusion and was rebooting in binary. In the VIP box, murmurs gave way to panic. A representative from the trade coalition leaned forward. If she wins, the treaties. must be renegotiated. And the league standings? Flipped. The Yelp delegate gurgled in concern. We may have to respect them. Back on the field, the tension thickened like gravity. Mira and Korthak faced each other across cracked terrain, their breath visible in the artificially thinned atmosphere. This was no longer the joke match. It was becoming something else. A test. A reckoning. She tightened her gloves. He scraped one claw against the ground, cracking it. They stared each other down. And then, softly, almost too soft to hear, Mira said, "Round 2. And moved first. No charge. No shout. Just precision." She blurred into motion, calculating, cutting across the arena in angles designed not to impress, but to dissect. She wasn't here to win on style. She was here to end a myth. Korthak roared, met her mid-lunge, and the two clashed again in a storm of brute force and razor-precise evasion. She ducked a sweeping claw, slammed a knee into a vulnerable joint, and twisted away before he could react. He staggered. Just slightly. The first stagger. And the audience noticed. They didn't cheer. They gasped. Mira didn't stop. She pressed the advantage. Another feint, another strike, another fragment of the rhythm broken. He blocked her next attack, just barely. Slammed a fist down, missed. Clawed sideways, caught fabric, but not flesh. He was off balance. "Stop dodging," he bellowed. "Start hitting," she replied. Their dance continued, bloody, brilliant, brutal. But underneath the spectacle, something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't meat anymore. She was threat. She was math. She was inevitability. And Korthak Dveril, breaker of sieges, devourer of champions, began to feel, though he would never admit it, the first flicker of fear. They locked eyes again, breathless. And in that gaze, Mira saw the moment he realized she wasn't just surviving. She was planning the kill. He opened his mouth. But she beat him to it. "Boom," she said, softly, and disappeared into the mist. The mist curled around the arena like a living thing. Pale blue tendrils coiling over jagged terrain, sinking into craters, sliding over the corpses of previous matches like a lover returning home. It smelled of antiseptic and regret, and left a faint tingling on the skin. Korthak Dveril squinted into it with his second and third eyelids, his massive form outlined in flickers of hazard light crimson. Somewhere in this hellscape, a human woman was planning how to humiliate him. He found the concept infuriating. Above the field, drones hummed into position, orb-like observers, their cameras blinking like sleepy gods. A dozen languages whispered commentary across every known comm channel. Bookies updated odds so fast the digits stuttered. The line on Mira Carter had shifted from funeral favorite to uncomfortably viable. And still she didn't reappear. The arena announcer, a sentient crystal lattice with aspirations of Broadway stardom, whispered into the ears of trillions. "Ladies, gentle beings, and polyforms, we are entering the final shift. All bets are locked. All prayers are void. Gravity is about to become a suggestion." A click from the control box. The arena groaned. Then everything changed. The battlefield rotated 37 degrees. Terrain that had once been flat was suddenly vertical. A low thrumming indicated gravity wells disengaging in selective patches. Sand, rubble, and small bones began to drift skyward, or sideways, depending on perspective. Korthak adjusted immediately. His claws embedded in stone, muscles flaring as his enormous bulk anchored itself against the tilt. For all his brutish reputation, he moved with calculated grace, built for chaos, sculpted by bloodshed. He liked a changing battlefield. It made killing feel personal. He waited. Still no Mira. "Come out, Terran," he growled, his voice carrying across the wind-shifted space. "Face me, or prove every joke about your species right." A rock pinged off his shoulder. Small. Meaningless. Except it hadn't been thrown from above. It had come from below. Korthak's head snapped down. His pupils narrowed. She was upside down. dangling from a broken segment of scaffolding, half hovering in one of the low-grav pockets like a spider on silk. Silent. Watching. Smirking. "I thought about making a dramatic entrance," Mira called, her voice casual. "But honestly, nothing says, 'I've done my homework,' like a well-timed gravity hack." Korthak bellowed and launched toward her, claws first. But the moment his body passed through the mist barrier, everything went wrong. One claw caught nothing but atmosphere. His second foot found no purchase, because the gravity in that patch had suddenly doubled. His momentum carried him forward at an awkward angle, slowed, twisted. Mira moved. Not fast. Right. She floated backward in the opposing grav patch, adjusted her trajectory with a flick of her foot, and, mid-spin, kicked Korthak square in the jaw with a satisfying crack that echoed like a gunshot across the arena. He crashed into the terrain with a sound like collapsing scaffolding and crushed bone. Not fatal. Not even seriously wounding. But humiliating. The crowd made no sound. Not yet. Still trying to figure out what they'd seen. She landed lightly on a fragment of floating rock, stretching her arms overhead like a gymnast post-routine. "Fun fact," she said brightly, "the shift delay between grav zones is exactly 0.72 seconds. You move through fast enough, you can ride the seam like a current." Korthak growled, shaking the dust from his eyes. Blood trickled from his jaw. "You engineered that?" She tilted her head. "More like, I anticipated it. One of us studied orbital mechanics. The other, judging by the smell, ate the textbook." He charged again. But now, every movement felt slower. Every missed strike, every misplaced footstep, carried weight. Not just physically, but symbolically. The tide was turning. Above, commentators frantically adjusted their tone. No longer pitying the human. Now they were trying to understand her. "Let's review," one of them buzzed. "She's small, underarmed, and, wait, what is she even armed with?" Nothing obvious. But Mira had tools. Subtle ones. Like the microfilament sensors stitched into her gloves, tuned to environmental shifts. Or the latent tactical overlay injected through a retinal flicker, illegal in 12 sectors, but no one checked humans. Or the mind. God help them all, the mind. While Korthak operated on instinct and training, she wielded data like a blade. Every strike she'd taken, every movement she'd made, it had all been catalogued, analyzed, filed into predictive patterns. And now she was solving him. He leapt again, claw aimed for her throat. She bent at the last second, letting the artificial gravity pull her sideways just enough to slip under the blow. Her elbow caught his wrist. Her foot pivoted off a floating stone. And then she was behind him. She didn't punch. She didn't need to. She simply tapped 2 fingers to the joint in his lower back, the one he always guarded just a little too tightly. He roared and spun, lashing out. Missed. She drifted backward again, a dancer in a lethal ballet. And the arena began to catch on. Not just the crowd, but the infrastructure. Drones refocused. Zoomed in. Analysts ran simulations that, until now, had never been required. Could a human win? Could she be the weapon? In the VIP box, a trade coalition exec choked on his wine substitute. "If she wins, we lose 300 million in military projections," a voice muttered. "Worse," said another. "We lose face." In the far corner of the arena, Mira recalibrated. The fight was far from over, but momentum had shifted. Korthak was bleeding from 4 superficial wounds. She had a cracked rib and 1 dislocated finger. Not bad, considering. Her internal HUD blinked. Tactical window. 14 seconds. It was enough. She crouched low, let herself float into the unstable mid-gravity bubble near the arena's broken southern wall. This was where they stored the wreckage, shards of prior fights, chunks of armor, lost limbs from braver or dumber contenders. Her fingers brushed against a half-shattered spearhead. Just enough weight. Perfect. She caught the fragment, tested its heft, and adjusted her angle. Korthak saw her and laughed, a deep, rumbling sound. "You search for scraps now?" A fitting end for a species of scavengers. Mira didn't reply. She let the arena do the talking. He charged, again. Predictable now. Furious. She let him get close. Closer. At the last second, she ducked, slid along the shifting slope of a gravity seam, flipped over his shoulder, and slammed the spearhead into his back joint. Not deep, but precise. It triggered something old. Scar tissue? Nerve node? Whatever it was, Korthak roared and dropped to one knee. The crowd gasped. And then they began to cheer. Not all of them. Not yet. But some. Enough. Mira landed on a high point, hair blown back, sweat streaking down her neck. Fun fact number 2, she called, voice crackling over the arena comms. If you hit the same spot 3 times, even a Lyrox will twitch. Korthak staggered upright. His breath rasped. She is cheating, hissed a war priest in the stands. She is thinking, replied a quiet voice beside him. On the field, Korthak backed away for the first time. Mira didn't pursue. Not yet. Let him regroup. Let the crowd soak it in. Let the council watch. Every second she survived undermined the image of human inferiority. Every move restructured the politics of violence. She wasn't supposed to be capable of this. She wasn't a soldier of legend. She was a nobody. And that made her lethal. He snarled, spitting blood. Why do you fight, human? What do you gain? Myra's voice was soft now, almost intimate. Proof. He blinked. Of what? She stepped down from her perch, each step deliberate. No longer running. No longer dodging. That your myths, she said, bleed. The arena pulsed with that line. Somewhere, 1,000 meme channels clipped it. Somewhere else, generals whispered to aides. Every diplomat in the VIP box suddenly had the same thought. We need a new plan. Back on the battlefield, Mira stood 5 meters from him now. Neither moved. The next hit would decide everything. Korthak's claws glowed faintly. He was calling on his final surge, his last reserve of fury. The kind that had ended 1,000 lives. Mira flexed her fingers. And smiled. The announcer, still stunned, whispered over the comms. Ladies and gentle beings, we have no precedent for this. The human is still standing. And Korthak, killer of champions, wasn't charging. He was calculating. At last. Mira tilted her head, just enough to suggest a bow. Ready when you are. And then everything went quiet. No commentary. No sound. Just a breathless pause, in a battlefield that had stopped pretending to obey gravity. The final act loomed. And Mira Elise Carter, human, underestimated, impossible, stood with all of history watching. She wasn't the storm. She was the calm before it. One breath. Mira Carter measured time by the rhythm of her lungs. Inhale, 3 counts. Hold, 2. Exhale, smooth, controlled. That was the cadence of her world. Not adrenaline. Not fear. Breath. Precision. She had survived deserts, vacuum pockets, corporate boardrooms. Each death dodged had begun with that same sacred ritual. Control the breath, control the moment. Across from her, Korthak Dveril finally stilled. His eyes, each the size of a human fist, narrowed beneath his bony crest. His breath came in ragged bursts, nostrils flaring with each inhale like a war beast on the edge of frenzy. His right claw twitched. The wound in his spine still bled. He was fast, even now. Dangerous. But he wasn't patient. And that, finally, was the crack she needed. The arena had quieted to a silence more profound than vacuum. No drones moved. No audience member so much as blinked. Somewhere in orbit, warlords paused their declarations, generals suspended campaigns. The outcome of 1,000 unspoken treaties, 1,000,000 wagered lives, hung on the posture of a bruised human woman and a bleeding alien titan. One bullet. She didn't have one. Not really. Not in the traditional sense. But Mira Carter had always been creative. She glanced once, fleetingly, toward the wreckage mound. A shattered broadcast antenna. Carbon steel. Sharpened by shrapnel and time. The last remnant of a failed propaganda drone. Perfect. A gust of destabilized wind shifted the arena gravity again. Not a full tilt, just a subtle tremble. Enough to suggest instability. Enough to promise that the battlefield, like everything else in this corrupt galaxy, would never remain balanced for long. She moved. A flicker. Then vanished from view. Korthak spun too late. The first thing he felt was pressure at the base of his skull. Light, like the kiss of a falling leaf. The second thing he felt was nothing, because by then Mira had already flipped backward, dragging the sharpened antenna across a nerve cluster so obscure that only someone with access to dissection records from the Targothi autopsy files would even know it existed. She landed in a crouch. Didn't rise. Watched. Korthak stumbled. One step. Another. He reached up as if to scratch the spot where she'd touched him. And then, he stopped. Just stopped. His legs froze. His upper torso twitched once, like a broken puppet on bad wiring. His mouth opened, soundless. Paralysis. The crowd didn't cheer. Not yet. Because something about it felt too quiet. Too surgical. Too human. Mira rose slowly. Every movement precise. Her ribs hurt. Her muscles screamed. Her fingers were coated in grime and borrowed blood. And still she moved like a ghost wrapped in flesh. The crystal lattice announcer didn't speak. It couldn't. Its voice, like the rest of the arena, had been stunned into submission. Korthak collapsed forward onto one knee. His claws dug into the dirt. But his body would not rise. He looked up at her. Not with rage, but with understanding. Because in that moment, the myth broke. The myth of the indomitable warrior. The narrative of invincibility. The propaganda about the fragility of humans. Shattered. Mira stopped an arm's length away from him. No weapons. No dramatic monologue. She simply looked down and whispered, "One breath, one bullet." Then she turned her back on him. Walked away. The crowd screamed. Not in rage. Not in confusion. But in revelation. The shift was seismic. Diplomats reached for comlinks. Council aides began quietly deleting old memos. Somewhere in a floating observation pod, a Hernak war minister leaned forward and muttered, "We need to recall our scout fleets from Seoul." Immediately. The crowd roared louder. A name took shape, not chanted, not yet, but whispered from being to being. Mira. Carter. Sniper. Weapon. And Korthak. He knelt, unmoving, defeated not by strength, but by understanding. He would live. Mira had ensured that. Because what she needed was not a corpse. What she needed was a witness. She crossed the edge of the arena as the arena's gravity finally stabilized. The floating rubble settled. The drones resumed motion. The announcer stuttered back to life, its voice jittery and halting. Combat has concluded. The winner is the human combatant, Mira Carter. First of her kind. Above the blood-soaked sand, a dozen holoscreens lit up with her face. Gritty, exhausted, unapologetic. No makeup, no filters. Just real. And the galaxy leaned in. Because this changed everything. On the diplomatic channel, the neutral sector ambassador from RHYXX-9 called an emergency session. In the barracks of the Sithari Mercenary Guild, training manuals were immediately flagged for revision. Human profiles, previously filed under low threat/high morale value, were upgraded to unknown capacity/extreme caution. And in the back corridors of the Galactic Council, the chairwoman of interplanetary warfare whispered to her adjutant, "Get me Earth's ambassador. Now." Back in the arena tunnel, Mira finally exhaled. The breath had been held for too long. Her ribs pulsed. Her lungs ached. But the release felt like prophecy. She slumped against a wall and closed her eyes. Footsteps approached. Not heavy ones. These were careful. Crisp. Deliberate. She didn't open her eyes. "Let me guess," she muttered. "You want to offer me a contract, or a commendation, or a job that involves assassinating a minor planetary regent." "Actually," said the voice, smooth, clipped, likely non-human, "I was instructed to give you this." A small card. Slick. No markings. Except for one logo, a target with a single in the center. Mira took it, studied it, and sighed. They always wait until the last bullet. Always. The figure left. She pocketed the card, knowing full well that accepting would mean stepping into shadows even darker than this. But that wasn't her concern right now. Right now, she had something more dangerous to deal with: fame. Mira Carter didn't want to be a symbol. Didn't want to represent Earth, or humanity, or anything grand. But fate, and by fate, she meant a bureaucratic mess of galactic-scale propaganda and misinformed arrogance, had other plans. Outside the arena, a mob of news feeds and reaction cam drones hovered like flies drawn to heat. "Miss Carter, what does your victory mean for Terran military standing? Is it true you trained in Martian low-grav death drills? Do you consider yourself a hero?" She stepped forward, paused, looked straight into the lead drone, red lens blinking, audience of trillions behind it, and said with perfect calm, "I'm not a hero." The drone stuttered, recalibrated. "But you won. I survived. There's a difference. But your tactics, your brilliance, weren't designed for glory," she cut in, eyes cold. "They were designed because I knew no one else in this galaxy would expect me to be dangerous. And I needed to walk out alive." A pause. The kind of pause that redefines headlines. And then she added, with the faintest curl of a smile, "But I'm glad I ruined a few spreadsheets." Galactic media exploded. Council aides fainted. Korthak Veril, still being dragged off the arena floor by med drones, began to laugh, a hoarse, pained, but genuine sound. Because even he knew, this wasn't the end of something. It was the start. Within hours, four militarized species recalled their invasion forces from human-adjacent territories. 2 minor empires began peace talks. And on a forgotten outpost on Europa, a girl barely 13 years old replayed Myra's fight for the 12th time and whispered, "We're not small." Somewhere far above the arena, a deep space signal pinged Earth. Encrypted. Coded. Blinking once every second. A single message. "We see you now." Mira Carter stood beneath the blood-spit arena's ancient archway, where generations of killers had posed in glory or fallen in shame. She didn't look up at the spotlight, didn't acknowledge the hovering medals or honorifics. She simply adjusted her boots, rolled her injured shoulder, and walked away. No fanfare. No salute. Just a woman, walking into legend, breath by breath. And somewhere in the quiet corridors of power, the galaxy trembled. Because the next time someone mocked the softness of humans, they would remember the sniper. And the silence before the shot.